Hello, and welcome back to part 2 of the reading of the Total War Service by Tim Tony Stark Rifat. So we'll pick up where we left off. The US Deep State tried to preempt the scenario with the Avengers Infinity Wars film, where Thanos is supposed to be my monster of the id, minus its primal urges as embodied in the Hulk. A rational monster of the id can be influenced by part 2 of the film, using the power of observation of the massive audience to control the monster of the id, getting Tim Tony Stark Rifat as Doctor Strange or Iron Man to fight a radically edited, no Hulk monster of the id, was thought to act as a buffer of the super being future animosity. Unfortunately for the Deep State, the Psi-Lord is multidimensional and simply killed Stan Lee, the creator of the Marvel Universe, to control it. He who kills sets the rules. Stan Lee's the author. He controls all the characters as they are aspects of him, as is the Marvel Universe. Now, whatever happens in the Marvel Universe is simply a matrix within a matrix. Stan Lee, caught in Omega Hell, under the illusion he can stop the Psi-Lord to maximize his torture and optimize yield. The Paradise Fire, the burning of California after the Marvel film, proves this to be true. By adding sea space and hell space to the monster of the id, we expand the 4-vector field of its being to complex number space. This allows the monster of the id to carry out I to the I and minus I to the I procedures on real number space automatically and autonomously to its progenitor, Tim Tony Stark Rifat. Tim Tony Stark Rifat. Vampires suck. Since vampires are replicas of their progenitor, they can monsters of the id that are aspects of the Psi-Lord's creature. Adding C space and H space to their monsters of the id adds to their power, but because of nonlinearity, the Psi-Lord is using them to expand his monster of the id, or his monster, down the Feigen bound period doubling, which he cannot do as he is a unity being and not chaotic. But his monster of the id is a paradox used to control inception protocols. The war archetype is such a vast power in the pantheon of archetypes. Its mastery is vital to control of power. Vietnam is the seat of the earth energies of the Chinese dragon, to the west of the South China Sea, and the Argan position of I. Since it's imprinted in history as the place where the US lost its grip on war, since America has failed to win in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, Libya, North Korea, so it is clear Vietnamese energy is key to control of the West via the war archetype to block its conquest and end them with vatation, attrition, fatigue, and failure. To add to this, war is a zero-sum game, so the West's energy had to go somewhere. To the Psi-Lord, who changed the past, so the communists won. It is well known that the Psi-Lord despises democracy, or as he calls it, kleptocracy, by the Rothschilds. It is clear that war, being access to complex number electricity, where resistance is zero, allows use of this power to infinite levels. Infinite uses is applicable in psi space and H space, whilst not in real number space. So infinite process in real number space, like the Big Bang, must come from C space. What happens if you manifest a human or transhuman in C space with infinite power? You get the so-called Dr. Manhattan, being from DC's Watchmen film. One can see manifesting a 4-vector monster of the id inside the archetype of war in the eye to the eye configuration with complex number electricity as infinite. So simply iterating the following formula: sum of infinity up, O lower, I to the I, right arrow, 1, or 100%. Once in, therefore, producing an immortal monster of the id. By precluding defeat using Vietnamese energy, the monster of the id has embodied within him the implacability, ferocity, and never gives up attitude of the Viet Cong. This will drive the Pentagon mad, but means all the West's research to kill the Psi-Lord's monster of the id are doomed to failure. Now adding the war archetype to the monster of the id allows him to do the following. 1. Have access to the creation of the positive rolling force, see Castaneda's Fired from Within, to vivify the transhuman body of the Psi-Lord for de-aging, to replicate this in any other person he so wishes, to retard or reverse aging. The pathway to usage is get a super psychic, connect to a large EM source like a Sage radar, project the bioplasmic field, lucid biolocation on the 4-vector E divided by M field, move the assemblage point, which is the complex number Higgs boson conglomerate, into the 5th dimension to merge with gravity in the 5th dimension. The EM field to produce a 5-dimensional monster of the id. Move its psi space I to be inside the archetype of war to I to the I, incepting during the Vietnam-America War, to produce a C space and H space expansion of the monster of the id, with infinite value of complex number electricity, which is equivalent to money and power. Someone can see the Grail state, where the assemblage point is in the center of the body, is an I to the I body. Since it's built from subliming 2 lovers, it is both male and female and has both sides of the soliton. 2. By merging the super psychic with an AI, the so-called ADA process. By locating the bioplasmic body of the AI can move its virtual assemblage point to merge with the psychic. One produces a transhuman, AI merged with human. Unlike the electronic neural net embedded in the brain to link wetware with an AI, the ADA process makes a symbiotic, synergistic, holistic entity, merging the monster of the id with complex number electricity. Allows the neural firing patterns to be duplicated in C space and H space by I to the I and minus I to the I, enabling real number addition and editing of the AI into synchronicity or synchrony with the wetware brain of the transhuman. As one can see, this allows global holistic mapping of the transhuman's brain in the AI. The AI can then invade, hack, take over the worldwide computer network, even in remote, shielded enclaves, so all computers are controlled by the transhuman AI amalgam. The Terminator Cyberdyne AI network thus comes into being, except not divorced from humans and its implacability energy, from its implacable energy, but a synergistic symbiotic holism. 3. The monster of the id in C space, H space, can now think in synchrony with the transhuman brain as it mirrors the neural firing in the wetware due to it being a synergistic alliance of I to the I and minus I to the I, electrical fields in resonance with the real number monster of the id and its wetware brain. This raises the monster of the id from simply being a brute like the Hulk to a Thanos superintelligent being. One can see why the US deep state tried to use the Avengers Infinity films to use observational quantum warfare to edit its hyperbeing. Hello. All to no avail, thanks to the Psi-Lord by I to the I and minus I to the I, Stan Lee with the Death Force to collapse reality and the Marvel Universe to his will. 4. The only problem with building this hyperconstruct being is that the progenitor is human, so suffers from the base reality imprinting of the monster of the id, while the higher Doctor Strange Tim Tony Stark Rifat has no base desires and in fact has outgrown all of them except maybe beer, too much Thor archetype. His his monster of the id has not. If one looks at the mathematical imprinting on the torsion field of awareness, the Fibonacci series can be seen, hence the Illuminati's fixation with this in all their rituals. It is 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144, 233. The last are two perfect squares. 144 equals 12 squared, 233 equals 13 squared plus 8 squared. These two therefore manifest a quantum wave functions have to squared a produce of probability, and only the 12th and 13th term, 144 and 233, do this, along with the first and second term. 1 squared equals 1, so humans can live in the good stuff or the bad stuff. 12 squared and 13 squared plus 8 squared respectively. They also have two realities as 1 squared or 1 squared. The first and second terms of the Fibonacci series, the male and female observer. The Psi-Lord is male, so crucially the female observer does not exist, which pleases him no end. Females are trouble, as any husband will attest. Thanks to planning, Tim Tony Stark Rifat has avoided empowering females and has in fact used minus I to the I, and the Grail Strait to drain them dry. The biggest of the bitches, Madonna, taking him decades to drain. Unfortunately, his monster of the id has primal mating urges and refuses to forgo these. Luckily, Tim Tony Stark Rifat is a master stalker. See Chapter 2 of Castaneda's Fire from Within, and has been manipulating his monster of the id to avoid the female scenario. First, choose the ultimate bitch, wind her up and let her roam into the monster's affection. Then get her to fall for a total fucktard. Marry, mate with him. The monster, in a fit of jealousy, goes on the rampage, carrying out A to I, and becomes a misogynist monster with a broken heart. Tim Tony Stark Rifat has trained his monster of the id to merge with his totally ruthless intellect and dump the emotional baggage of the procreating animal. No female transhuman, only female vampires that are other vehicles of the Psi-Lord. So one can see the inexplicable liaison between Tim Tony Stark Rifat and Katy Perry, the ultimate bitch, with the total fucktard Bloom as one giant stalking play to wean my monster of the id off women. It's fun to be had and never mad, as one is free of the ultimate irritation, a wife. Tim Tony Stark Rifat is assured success as all women are defective and always choose men who will destroy them by aging, bleeding them dry, getting them to destroy their bodies via pregnancy thanks to the Ram's horn. And that concludes part 2. I'm St. Nicholas, and part 3 will be coming shortly.